talking to you. And sorry I couldn't make it, but how was that big event? I think it was at the Rivoli. I could be wrong. Where was that?
Yeah, it was at the Riv,
Okay.
and yeah, it went down very, very nicely. Thanks. We had a great turnout, and ended up with a few interviews and things coming out of that, including this one with you.
Of course, this is a release of your new album that we're going to get into. But I want to talk a little bit. You know what? Before I even get into anything else, what is that behind you, man?
Oh, just artwork in my house.
Is this artwork that you've done or artwork that you've bought?
Some is artwork I've done, some is artwork I bought. Let's see if I shift this, it's hard to tell. So there's yeah, that's one of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. I think I don't really have much of mine. That's just one of mine. The rest of them are over there. I'd have to shift it around. I'm afraid that I might make the watcher dizzy.
No, that's okay. You know, when you look at your career, you seem to be the all-around man, meaning, of course, you've been in so many different aspects of the art world, entertainment world, just the world, period. What do you think it was about yourself growing up that led you into being able to do so many different things where a lot of us may try one thing, two things? You were never afraid to try something. And once you accomplished it, you were like, okay, I've done that. Let me go over here and try this now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's a couple of things to that, I guess. One was I had this really big racing accident, on a motorcycle when I was 22. And I had, I was in a coma for a while. They was nip and tuck as to whether I'd survive. And I had a chance to reflect on things there. And I'd already been, very invested in writing and in painting and then racing at that point. And I thought I didn't regret a moment of my time until then. And I thought I'd like to make sure the rest of my life is like that, where I've really got as much out of it as I can as I go along. And that if that moment came again, I wouldn't have thought, oh, I have this regret. And so I guess in a way that's allowed me a certain permission in my head to go ahead and try things and see how I go in them. And I've had reasonable success in them. So it's been worthwhile, but you got to be prepared to fail too.
You kind of mentioned, but I want to go back again before the accident. What were some of the things that you were doing as a young man?
Well, I guess the things that interested me in the art world at that time was I was writing poetry a lot. I actually won my school poetry prize 3 years in a row, which was kind of cool. I did an art exhibition at age 18, and then another one, the first one at Brock University that they ever had when I was 20. And then, I got into motorcycles. I did dirt track racing, used to run at the Welland County Speedway. So that was kind of
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's old school. That's old school. I want to even jump in even earlier than that. Growing up, what kind of child were you? It's because it seems like you were somebody who maybe, I don't know, I could be wrong, but you seem like the kind of person who can't stay still for one moment. You got to do things. You got to build. You got to get out there. You just gotta. So sitting you in front of a TV wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I guess that was tending to be the case. I grew up on a farm. I had a horse, so I used to love going riding, and that was a way to get away from things from age 11 on. I was a daydreamer, though. I was definitely a real daydreamer. But I sort of took an unusual course and everything. I have no idea why. For example, I didn't play hockey. I did figure skating. It's like, where did that come from? I don't know. It was just, I thought, oh, I'd like to try that. And so there was, I guess, always a little bit of a restless nature in me.
But as the accident happened, can you talk about leading into that accident? Because, of course, is a very, very profound moment in your life. In fact, if things didn't turn out the way they have, we wouldn't be doing this interview right now.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I dropped out of university after 2 years at Brock, and I went to Paris to study art. And I came back, and I was trying to supplement my living as an artist, and I got a job running the National Ski Museum. In fact, this guy and I pretty much started it. And it was in Ottawa that I had the accident. And I came out of that afterwards. I don't know, how would I put it? It was like, I was then, okay, where am I going to go? Because part of it also was looking at my art and saying, I like it, and I still enjoy, and I'm happy with a lot of paintings or pen and inks, etc., that I've done. But I thought, this isn't core somehow. This isn't right at the core of me. This is close to it, but there's other things I want to do. So I went into the stock brokerage business for a while. I ended up amazingly parlaying my racing success in cars into getting the job running Porsche Canada. So, I had a very busy business career in a way, as well as doing a very busy other career. I guess I was always doing at least two things at a time.
But why wasn't there any fear of almost losing your life on a motorcycle in a motorcycle accident, and then you go into something that's just as fast?
Yeah. There really, I stopped racing motorcycles for my mother's sake. She really didn't want me to do that again. And so I said, well, look, I'm going to do cars, though. Is that okay? And she said, well, I guess it's a little bit better. Yeah, I did end up leaving. Like, I raced at Le Mans twice, once in 81, once in 83. In those years, in 81, 82, and 83, a friend of mine was killed in each of those years. And in those days, the safety precautions they have today, we just didn't have them. And I got to tell you, the second time I was at Le Mans, going through the kink flat out at 230 miles an hour, car skittering a little bit, and you're saying to yourself, man, this is starting to become more of an intellectual exercise for me, in terms of I'm intellectually making the decision to keep my foot down. And I think fear has finally become a factor in my life. And that's what I knew. I was going to be leaving professional racing. I did race again at the club level, but it's not the same, and it doesn't have the same kind of consequences. And certainly one of the things about racing today is I mean, there are hardly ever any more deaths in racing, but there were a lot in the 70s and 80s, early 80s.
It's so funny because it's almost like I want to compare you to the Canadian version. If I was to take the Canadian James Bond and the Canadian Tony Stark, who becomes Iron Man, put those together, it kind of describes your life.
Yeah, I think without quite those high levels of success, but I am, rather than the $6 million man, maybe the $1 million man. I have a plate in my head and pins through various parts of my body, etc. So there are some permanent improvements.
Yeah, well, Evil Knievel would be proud of you. So no worries there. But throughout this whole time, somehow music becomes a factor. Where was music throughout this whole time, from growing up to the riding motorcycles and being in that business, to the Porsche business, to stockbroking? Was music always somewhere as a shadow throughout that time?
Yeah, I'd put it this way. Went to the Mariposa Folk Festival for the first time when I was 16, and I heard the Buddy Guy Blues Band, and it changed my life. I never heard music the same way again. I used to drive my motorcycle to Cleveland or to Chicago, to hear Albert King or James Cotton or, Howlin' Wolf or whoever else. I just was absolutely somehow or another just riveted by that sound. So music, and then that influenced how I listened to all sorts of other music. And I liked other music as well. I mean, I always, we got a lot of great Canadian artists I like Neil Young or Robbie Robertson and people like that. But there was just something about the blues. So certainly that touched me. How I got into music myself was kind of odd. I was walking up the east side in New York City. There was a sign outside a bar, and it said poetry reading tonight with George Plimpton. And George Plimpton is a sports writer, and I thought, hell, I'm sure I can write poetry as well as George Plimpton. So I went in, ordered a large scotch, and asked to see the manager. And it turned out it was the manager owner, retired model, who said, yeah, what do you want? And I said, I'd like to open for George. And she says, well, give me a couple of poems. And I did. And she said, yeah, I like that. Okay, you can open for George. Anyway, make the story a little shorter. A couple of weeks later, they had me there as their Valentine Day poet, but they had a woman folk singer open for me. And I thought, man, I'm going to be kind of dull just doing spoken word after this lovely bit of music that was done. So I said to myself, when I get back to Toronto, I'm going to see if I can put together a band to put sounds behind my poetry and spoken word. A year later, I had my first CD out, and I did 2 more. And in the 90s, ended up selling almost 10,000 CDs as a privateer, which isn't bad. And it's just stayed there in my head all through this time. I had to actually go back and do real jobs for a while because I was out of money. And so then, you know, I got back into it again a couple of years ago, and it's evolved, and my songwriting's evolved, and it's now much more lyrical as opposed to poetic. And it's kind of more, it's got more hooks in the melody. It's more driven in a slightly more traditional sense, I think, of music, whereas I had a lot of spoken word before.
Then let's make this official. What is the name of the new album, and how does it represent you in this point in your career?
So it's called Good Day, Good Night. And I think sometimes when you do have a good day, it just leads naturally into a good night. And as I'm getting older, I'm getting closer to that good night stage of everything. And so it kind of has reflections of both. There's a certain kind of reflective quality, I think, in a lot of the songs. And I think as well, as I said, I sort of feel like, see, I've done 2 albums. I just released the album 4 in March of this year, and we actually already have about 450,000 YouTube views on that, which was cool as our sort of restart. And now this one. So there's 18 songs in a 2-year period here that got done. And yeah, I just found I had, I guess from the hiatus, I was painting a lot during the hiatus, but not doing music. And so I ended up with a lot to say.
Just curious, because I haven't seen the cover. But I'm just curious. Did you create the cover, or did you do that?
Yeah. So the cover is actually, it's me in front of some graffiti in a walkway with a painting, one of my paintings. So it's kind of like my art and street art and me.
Are you going to get a chance to tour this album, or we see some shows either locally or around Ontario or across Canada?
I think what I've decided on that is to end up going a little bit with how does it go? What kind of traction do I get on the streaming media, and whether I get enough that I can start to ask for a reasonable amount of money to do shows or festivals and stuff. I did the in racing, you have your racing team and you're touring around, and of course all my money and all the sponsorship money always went to the car, not to our accommodations or travel or whatever. And so I spent a lot of time in flea bag motels then. And then when I was doing the stuff in the 90s, the same happened with the music and the band. But of course, one of the differences is with the band, there's only ever one adult, and that was me. Everybody else was either a child or trying to remain a child or being influenced by drugs or alcohol in a way that made them childish, whatever. It became, a lot of work and hard work in the sense of not in great environments all the time. And I loved it. And I loved having the time doing that. But I really got to say now, I'd like to stay in better hotels and have a little easier go of it.
What advice can you give folks out there? Because it just sounds like you've had so many dreams that you decided on, went after it, and got it. Not a lot of people can say that they've had several and they've accomplished it. What advice can you give somebody who's even struggling just with that one dream, and hopefully they'll be able to accomplish it?
I guess there are a couple of things. First of all, I think actually a better way to describe my life would be second place. It's like, other than winning one Canadian championship in the cars, really, I've never really made it great in anything, but I've done well at things, and I've been in there and I've been really engaged and committed. And so what I'd say is, be prepared not to be the winner, man. I mean, be prepared, in fact, to fail. Be prepared to just go and do it because you just want to do it. I remember in '79, I came third in the Canadian Series. And then I thought, if I got a better car, I could win this. I know I could. And I did the next year. You know, I got no more enjoyment out of it than the year before. It was like, I realized the winning didn't really change anything for me personally in the car, what I was doing. And so I think that's part of it. You don't have to be the winner. You know, when people come on and there's a champion in the Olympics or something, and they say, see, it just tells you follow your dreams and you can do it. Well, no, you can't. Most of us, 99% of us aren't going to. And so, like, live your life anyway, because it's the engagement in that that matters. So that's one. And I think the second thing is, if you're driven by money, you're not going to be able to make the same choices. And you know it yourself. Everybody you know that I think probably you're really impressed with or engaged with or in a conversation or in anything, they didn't make any choices because of money. And what happens is, if you leave one field to go to another, you always take a hit. You're not going to be able to make that transition smoothly. But does it matter? I mean, it's like they say, it's the road itself. I had a motorcycle friend in university. You know, somebody you wouldn't have expected would be my best friend in university. He worked as a mechanic at a local shop. And we went on a long motorcycle ride with another guy one time. We had it snow and sleet and hail. Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. And John he decided he was going to start writing poetry, because I did. And he wrote an epic poem about it. And at the end, he said, and if they said, let's do it again, I'd say, let's go. Because it wasn't the sun we were looking to find. It was the looking. That's all. There's nothing more.
Bravo, David. Congratulations on this new album. Congratulations in such a storied life. I hope you plan on chronicling it like in a book in some point in time, because I think it'd be a great story to read. And cross fingers that somehow, some way, you're going to get enough hits where you can tour this. I think you have an incredible story, and I think it needs to be told, whether it be written musically or any other way. I think it's fascinating. Thank you so much for the interview. And again, all the success for 2023 and in 2024, my friend.
Thanks so much, Rudy. I really appreciate it and enjoyed this interview very much. You take care.